their voices as they say hi and introduce themselves. So, Alan, go ahead. Oh, we may have him actually on mute real quick. But
Hi everyone,
Alan,
this is Alan Lepofsky calling in from cold but sunny Toronto, Ontario.
all right. Next up, Holger.
Hi, this is Holger Mueller calling in from yay, rainy San Diego. Finally, some rain. Let's fire danger for Southern California.
Okay, Natalie.
Hi there, it's Dr. Nat, and it is 75 and sunny in Los Angeles.
All right, excellent. And I'm Ray, and then we've got Steve. Where are you, Steve, today?
I'm in Sydney. It's dark. I've got no idea what the temperature is, but we'll have breakfast after we're done here.
Thank you. As you can tell, we got a global team here of analysts that are really looking at this, and really we want to share with you some things that are happening on the digital disruption front. So you'll hear each one of our analysts' perspectives along the way. But let's start with this figure and think about what's happening. There is massive digital disruption in the marketplace. 52% of the Fortune 500 has disappeared since 2000. They've emerged. They've been acquired. They've even gone bankrupt since 2000. This is a tremendous amount of change. Since the inception of the Fortune 500, it was only about 82% of the companies have turned. But since 2000, that's 52%. As you can tell, there's an inflection point that occurred around the internet age. And this digital disruption is continuing at a rapid pace. And what we wanted to do was take a look and understand what was happening. We wanted to go past that traditional social media, the social, mobile, social media, analytics, big data, what's happening with cloud and cloud computing. We wanted to get around that and look beyond that to see what was happening behind digital. And what we did was we started in November and we thought through a futurist framework that we applied to understand where things were happening beyond 2014, really taking a look at the next 3 to 4 years as to what was going to be the shift. And so we looked at 6 key factors, and this is really what forms PESTEL. This is the framework that we're using to drive our research as we think a little bit towards where the futurists are, where they're thinking about 10 to 20 years out, and back to where disruptive technologies are going to be and how they impact business models. And as you know, that's really what the core focus of Constellation Research is. That's the heart of why we exist, is thinking about what's the art of the possible. So we look at political factors, what's happening with our political class. We look at economy, right? The macroeconomic conditions that are happening. And then we also look at societal shifts that are happening and moving that may impact how adoption or how business models form. And then, of course, the technology. And then we look at environmental factors and, of course, what could happen in legislation that might hinder all these digital disruptions. And so we can kind of take a look at each one of these. So I'm going to go through each really briefly so you can share with you what's happening. And of course, we've got a full report behind this, but we want to give you just a taste for these shifts, and then we'll go into each of the analyst perspectives as that shapes their research and really looks, in terms of their forward-thinking ideas. So on the political side, we actually have this significant problem where policy lags the pace of change. We're in a situation where a lot of the politicians that are making decisions around technology policy aren't able to understand, one, which is the tech ignorance plagues political class, or have the ability to make changes quickly enough, which is what's going on in policy lags pace of change, or are being influenced by lobbyists who are telling them what to do because they have no clue what's going on. And this is really why we think political pressures really point to what we're calling a lack of digital proficiency in the political class. What I mean by this is the fact that the people making the rules, the people governing us, are not only being unduly influenced, they're also ignorant. And I know that's a really harsh statement to say, but why? Let's take a look, right? In China, the Politburo and the ruling class, right? 8 out of the top 10 members have science degrees or engineering degrees. We're lucky if we've got like 10 senators in the US that actually have a science or engineering or medical or technology background. That's scary, right? Especially when all these shifts that are happening in the marketplace are coming back to technology. And because they are ignorant, they're counting on lobbyists to help inform them of decisions, right? We're making a lot of decisions because funded interests are saying, hey, by the way, legislator, here's what's going on. And on top of that, we are moving so slow in terms of policy changes. For example, in the world of privacy, we're not building protections for individuals anymore, right? And so this gives you an idea of what's happening on the political side that will set the stage. Now, keep in mind, along the way, economic trends are happening too, right? And at the macroeconomic conditions, these are things that are going to impact the business models, right? And for those following, please follow us on Twitter, on CR Chat as well, hashtag CR Chat. You'll see a lot of conversations that will be happening there. We'll also be taking questions. So what's going on the economic side? Well, the era of cheap money is almost over. We're done in the US, printing all the money in the world and twice over. And as that happens, you're going to see interest rates go up. You're going to see investment change. So right now, lots of investment is going to BRICS and mints because they're getting better returns. But as US interest rates change, you'll see a contraction of investment in foreign areas. The US is also a hotspot for investment, not only because of technology, but the economy is doing slightly better than everyone else, just slightly enough that people are actually investing in the US or parking their money here. And when they're parking their money here, that's actually giving them opportunities to drive up real estate, opportunities to invest in technology funds, and actually you're actually seeing tech as the main beneficiary of really US investment. And then population dynamics around the world is interesting because these population dynamics are changing the way we grow. So on one hand, if you look at BRICS and you look at mints, BRICS being Brazil, Russia, India, China, mints being Malaysia, Indonesia, Nigeria, and Turkey, and South Africa, if you want to add that. Population dynamics are interesting because these are populations that are growing rapidly. They've got massive pyramids, except for China, which is inverting, but these massive pyramids create opportunities. So, for example, if I own like a Kentucky Fried Chicken or McDonald's, right, would I want to put an initial store in the US or in Germany or in the UK? No, I'm not going to get a lot of growth. But if I'm doing it in Brazil or Indonesia or Nigeria or Turkey, wow. I mean, those markets are so hot, so hopping, we're actually seeing this kind of shift. And the folks that actually understand how to harness digital in these economic conditions are actually going to make massive, massive shifts, not only in the way they communicate, not in the way they provide offers, not only in the way they expand and create scale. Add population dynamics to digital disruption, you've got a huge catalyst in terms of growth. Now, on the other hand, we're not hiring humans anymore. All this job growth is going to robots. And that gets very scary because what we're doing is we're automating a lot of tasks that people normally would have done as laborers, or people would have done in a factory floor, or people would have done as an accountant, or people would have done as a physician, or people might have done as a lawyer, because we're actually building smarter systems. And these are sentient systems. These are things that are allowing us to do massive automation, not just on physical tasks, but decisions. And so people are talking about jobless recoveries. This is going to go on for a long time, right? These jobless recoveries are here because, right, we're automating things, not just the robots, but also decision systems. Now, the other piece in the economic trends that drive this that is interesting are manufacturing. We're seeing a return of manufacturing back to local areas. It's a combination of the fact that we have cheap energy sources. Yes, you might like fracking. Maybe you think fracking is the evil, but that's actually driving down the cost of energy, which means it's actually offsetting the increasing cost of manufacturing in all these areas we've offshored manufacturing to. And so that, plus the combination of people worried about their IP and being stolen in some of these countries, manufacturing is coming back. Rolls-Royce, right? They brought back most of their jet engine propulsion stuff to Coventry in England, right? And you're seeing that. And you're seeing that all over. People are thinking about how do we move this stuff back or actually get it near-shored along the way on manufacturing. So these economic trends are really providing underpinning for some of these business model disruptions, especially as interest rates go up, especially as population dynamics shift where people invest in, especially where automation plays a role. The U.S. still has a place given its economic structure and its competitiveness. And then, of course, manufacturing around the world is going back local as a way to kind of combat IP theft. Then we get into interesting area around societal shifts, right? And the first one is one where it's getting a lot of attention, probably undue necessarily attention. But this is when we talk about access trumping ownership in a sharing economy. And everyone's like, oh, great, sharing economy. We can actually, everybody can actually create these new business models. No, 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 no. We've got a lot of pundits out there that are confusing what's happening in the sharing economy. And actually, as a side programming note, we actually will have at Constellation's Connected Enterprise. And since you're on this webcast, you get to hear this first. Rachel Botsman will be one of the keynotes. She is one of the founders of the sharing economy, and she's going to explain how it does really work. But access is trumping ownership because millennials don't have any cash. Jobless situation is pretty bad, and folks aren't being able to find employment. So, but people still need to access services. So people are looking at the sharing economy as a way to time slice ownership. Well, actually, not even ownership. Time slice access to goods and services. And so that's where you're seeing new business models like Airbnb and Lyft and Uber and other areas kind of play a role here. And so that's something to watch. However, in the sharing economy, those who actually own goods are the ones that are actually going to make the most, because in a digital world, this gets distributed. And in the sharing economy, where trust is an important factor, where you might say, Alan is a great person to rent a townhome to or condo to, but don't let him near a car, right? That would be like crazy, right? But these trust factors are showing up. And what happens is the poorest folks get hurt because the poorest folks are required to provide the most information, whereas the people who actually can afford and not have to share are going to provide less information. And we're going to create this big digital divide where the rich can actually have privacy, and the folks that don't have the means are going to lose all their privacy. They have to give it up in order to access in the sharing economy. So just something to think about. We also have 5 generations driven by digital proficiency, something that Alan Lepofsky has taken on. And she's really thinking about everything from digital natives to digital immigrants to digital voyeurs to digital holdouts and digitally disengaged individuals. And age is not a factor. I don't care about Gen Y, Gen X. I don't care about millennials. We're talking about folks thinking about digital proficiency as the factor that's important. And then, of course, privacy for convenience. Back to the piece that we're talking about, access in the sharing economy. Privacy and convenience in a post-NSA Snowden world. How much information do you want to give up? Not sure. Privacy issues are suddenly important. Identity, privacy. Where does this go? How does this impact credit ratings? Or how does it impact my ability to make a transaction? What happens to cash? Do we get rid of cash? Should we get rid of cash? Right? Those are the questions that are popping up. And then we're seeing a lot of generational and class warfare. Right? We've got situations where a lot of programs underfunded, right? We've got situations where governments can't take care of everybody that they need to, and we're seeing lots of redistribution, right? There is a shift for equality, and what does equality mean, or how do people move around those rungs? And as another programming note, which is very interesting, we actually have Raj Chetty from the Opportunity for Equality project, and he'll be there at our keynote for Constellation Connect Enterprise, talking about where are these rungs of equality? What changes? What are the big factors? And then the last one, which can get me a lot of trouble, is I actually think there's going to be a lot of backlash on Silicon Valley for disrupting people's daily lives. Right? The Valley is the place where we come, we disrupt ideas, we think about awesome things, we think about breaking business models, but there are real lives at stake. And I actually believe that there may be a terrorist incident in Silicon Valley in the next 5 to 10 years where someone's so upset at a company that has taken away their job, that has taken away their ability to make a living, that has put them in their misery, something may happen. Something may happen. We may get a backlash to the Valley and what it has done, unless the Valley comes back with a way to figure out how to give or how to change that situation and empower individuals again. But for right now, keep that in mind. Now, on the technology front, we see 3 big things. We're not talking about social, mobile, big data, cloud, you see anymore. That's old news. Those are the pillars that form the digital revolution. Those are the pillars that allow for digital business disruption. But we don't care about them individually. That is not important. What we care about is them in concert as pillars. How do they create new technology trends? Now, we could be talking about awesome stuff on nanotech and, the ability to have like see-through aluminum. That's happening with materials. We could talk about biotech and the ability to create personal genomes and personal slicing and really to create your own, RNA modules. But in the digital world right now, there are 3 big things that we have to think about. Right? In this digital world, there are 3 things that are important. One is mass personalization at scale. We're talking about the ability to deliver relevancy and context and personalization at the individual level. We're not talking about segments. We're talking about the individual level. We've got the computing power now to get there. We've got the capability to actually understand people well enough to be able to get to mass personalization at scale. And this is anything from like 3D printers, right, that are popping up, right, to the fact that put a 3D printer in an Amazon distribution center. What happens? Do I ever have to buy or get a spare part shipped from a manufacturing center? Maybe not. Right? Maybe the business becomes just a design firm. We also have big data business models in a world of sensor and analytical ecosystems. What am I talking about? People are walking around with wearables and Fitbits and fuel bands and, you know, thermostats are coming to life. Nest, right? Dumb devices. Your refrigerators are talking to you. Jet engines are talking to you. All these machines are suddenly putting together log data, information. And what's actually happening is the data inside these systems are more valuable than the products. People are brokering information. People are connecting the dots. They're building profiles. People are talking to people. Machines are talking to machines. People are talking to machines. All this is creating information that's being used to do prediction, that's being used to mine. And that information in these big data business models are much more important than some of the products that are being sold. They're double dipping. They're selling you the product, then they're capturing the information, they're selling that information back to you. But that's what's happening in these big data business models. And then, of course, we've got augmented humanity. This is taking natural language processing, artificial intelligence, you know, all this stuff coming together as we're improving our ability to make decisions. And think about the average physician and how much medical errors actually occur, right? And the ability to actually look at drug overdose information or drug interaction history or patient profiles and making sure that these things don't happen. Think about in the legal world, if you could just search every precedent that's out there and figure out which cases were actually much stronger. And if you think about in the US, the system is based on case law and precedents, right? You're trying to build a case. I mean, that would save so much time than having the first or second year legal, you know, lawyer go in and do that research, right? So we're seeing augmented humanity in all. So keep in mind, mass personalization at scale, big data business models, augmented humanity are the big tech trends that are going to be out there for the next 3 to 5 years. And then, of course, environmental factors, right? Environment is still important. We are seeing a reduction in consumption, right? People are trying to drive down how much they're consuming, not only for societal reasons, but people want to be environmental. So we see conservation being important, right? Despite the fact that people might be putting a solar panel up, despite the fact that, you know, the cost of energy is coming down, people know that they've got to drive down their infrastructure costs. This is anything from data centers being super PUE compliant to factories that are driving down the cost of energy, or driving down how much water they use. Sustainable manufacturing processes are now big. You see those Subaru commercials about zero landfill, right? And that's playing a big role. So we see environment play a role. We see environment in terms of these decisions. And then the last piece that we have is really about individual freedoms and privacy. Right? This is important. People are demanding. They are demanding that their privacy be taken into account. People are saying, look, how do you protect ourselves in this world of digital exhaust? And then on the other piece, on the legislative side, people are asking for laws to be passed around, you know, taxation. Right? There's not enough money. Let's go find another way to go tax someone. You know, every time you go rent a car, you see that, right? The rental car is $35 and the taxes are 40. What's wrong with that equation? But we're seeing lots of taxation come into place. We're seeing taxation drive and inhibit, in some cases, where these digital business models are going. And then we're also seeing legislation to break the digital divide. This is legislation that's actually put into place to help kind of create some level of fairness or improve opportunities along the way. So, so this is PESTEL. Right? This is the framework. This is the foundation of Constellation's research going forward. This is what every one of our business themes will tie back to. And what I think it's really important now is to share with you how that fits in the world of customer experience. I'm going to introduce you to Dr. Natalie Petouhoff. She's going to talk about customer experience in the context of these trends and, of course, what happens in our research going forward. So, Natalie, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Ray. Well, you know, it's been interesting to cover customer experience for the last 20 years, and as we look forward, The big question is, how do we actually create a customer experience? And there's so much data and so many options. And what I see as I talk to clients, they are really very, very, very confused. And so now the customer experience can kind of look like this mess. And what I'm trying to help customers understand is, how do we take all this new information and create a customer experience that is personalized, that is individualized, and also allows companies to really truly understand what it is that we're all able to do with this technology. Because in theory, the technology is great, right? But the question becomes, how do we actually uh, drive that for other people? And Courtney, can you advance the slides? Right. So if you're looking at this, and Ray and I were just at a conference yesterday, and so when you get all this information, it's kind of like a fire hose. And even though for me, I don't think a lot has really changed, because the more things change, the more they stay the same, we're still trying to reach customers. We're still trying to do customer acquisition and lead conversion rate and loyalty. But as you listen to all the things that are all the possibilities, most of you kind of feel like, okay, there's all this stuff. Social has added a speed to business. I think businesses speeded up when we added email, and now we have social. And so every single day, I don't know about you, but that's kind of what I feel. Let's go ahead to the next slide. As I've been doing research, what I found was that customers are adopting this new kind of experience. And a lot of that has been driven by things like social, the ability to talk to each other. I was buying a metal tea hot water heater at Christmas. And I thought, which one do I want to buy? And I went to Amazon and I started reading. There were 900 reviews from people I don't even know. People are talking to people, and it's affecting buying decisions. I mean, every time I give a talk, I say, how many of you have ever bought something? Everybody raises their hand. And then I say, how many of you have read an online review? Almost every single person in the room has. So with customers talking to customers and customers talking to companies, what you really see is that now customers have adopted this, but there's a chasm. And what we're looking here is really Geoffrey Moore's technology adoption curve. So customers in this new technology have adopted it, and the question becomes, next slide, where are companies? So as you're listening to this, you want to start to look at all the things that Ray has talked about, all the different coverage areas of all our different analysts. As you think about this, where are your customers in adopting this stuff? And a lot of them may be adopting it in their personal life, bring your device to work, all that kind of stuff. But the question is, how are companies going to keep up with creating these expectations of personalization and individualization? And what we see is customers are further ahead than the companies. And what this is creating is essentially a gap. So go ahead and advance the next slide. So this chasm. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to have your company fall into the chasm. And so the question becomes, how do I evaluate technology? How do I evaluate my strategy? How do I figure out what my business goals are? And how do I get the right technology to be able to really transform my business model and transform those customer experiences to meet the expectations, which are just getting higher and higher and higher. And our predictions here are that if companies can't really start to really transform that customer experience and close this gap, then it's going to end up being a really big problem. And what we see are that top companies are closing the chasm by empowering not only the employees, but also their customers by being able to freely express what they think and feel, getting that data back into that company, and really providing great customer experiences. So you want to start to ask yourself, where is your company on the customer experience adoption curve? And what we're predicting is that market leaders who really truly understand what this means and how they have to transform their business models, looking at the outcomes, if they did transform it, how they go to market, how do they make it easy to consume, and if they are truly differentiating their offerings, kind of think of the book Blue Ocean Strategy. Companies that are market leaders will grow their revenue faster and reduce their costs faster than any other segment. So if you're listening to this, you want to kind of think about this. The nut, kind of the review is, do you want to make more money? And do you want to reduce costs? And if you do, then you really need to focus on your customer experience and become a market leader. Ray, back to you.
No, these are great points, Natalie. And one of the things that I'm thinking about is like when you look at mass personalization at scale, right? How do we get that to a point to transform the customer experience so it's authentic, right? That becomes an important part, especially. And I think about some of the other things on the economic trends is maybe your customer experience is going to shift as you get to different populations. So this is a very exciting area. I can't wait to see what kind of research comes out on your end. I'm going to move over to Alan in cold Toronto, as he reminds us. But what's going on in the world of how does it impact social business in the future of work from that perspective?
Sure thing. Thanks, Ray. Hi, everyone. So there's two aspects to social business. The easiest way to divide these would be internal employee engagement and external customer engagement, which Natalie just talked about. The major shift that's sort of happening in the internal employee engagement, Ray, if you skip to the next slide, is really this growing up of the social business market. For the last few years, we have been getting everybody's sort of feet wet, or the training wheels, I call it, as employees get accustomed to sharing information with their colleagues, with their peers, even with customers and with competitors to some degree, similar to the way they share information with friends and family at home. They start using social tools that allow you to post information and respond to information. And we were spending the last couple of years just sort of getting used to that. Now what we're doing is moving that social element up to a more specific business use case environment. We're looking at how social can be implemented not just for sharing, but for integration into the business processes that run our organizations, how salespeople can do their customer relationships, how marketing people can run campaigns, how you can do learning and education or onboarding of employees. So we look at social shifting from sharing to what I call purposeful collaboration, where these new verbs like reply, share, like, comment, reshare, pin, etc., are becoming part of the nomenclature that we use at work. So Ray, you want to move to the next slide? Now, the important thing to think about is as we're moving to a more open and transparent environment where people are sharing information, is we have to be careful about that as well. Just because we're trying to be transparent and trying to be open, we still have to think about what this means to our organizations. Do you work in an industry where there's specific governance or compliance that you have to worry about? We have to make sure that these new tools still meet those regulatory compliance, but at the same time, we don't want to just be tethered to the old ways of thinking. We don't necessarily want to map, well, this is what we used to do in email for auditing and compliance, and we had to have 90 days, and we had to do all these things. We do need to look at the culture inside organizations. We do need to look at those rules as we're moving forward and see which things we can adjust more than just the technology. We need to see which things we can adjust culturally. We need to figure out, maybe it's okay that more people inside our organization have access to information. Maybe that information doesn't have to be as secured as we think it is. So I want you to think about that as you're going forward as well. Next slide. And on the technology decision point, if you could actually build through this slide, I want you to be aware that the tools that are supporting this open collaboration have moved from the sort of first generation of clients that were client-server platform to this new generation powered by cloud-based environments and by mobile access. And what it's allowing us to do is move from that first generation where we kind of, as an industry, all sold this as Facebook for the enterprise, to a more integrated experience that brings in all of those business use cases I just showed on the slide before and ends in this final point called purposeful collaboration. So we really see that from a technology standpoint, the tools have improved, the user interfaces have improved, the access methods have improved. So they're easier to get to, they're easier to use, and most importantly, the standards allow them to be shared across each other. And for my final slide, if we move to the next one, I want you to think about the partnerships and alliances that you do in this environment. Now, what I mean by that is when you're picking a vendor to be working with or a partner to be working with, perhaps the most important thing you need to be aware of is not just their tool or their own individual offerings or services. You have to think about the ecosystem that is built around those tools. There's a lot of great products out there. There's a lot of great companies out there, but choosing the best product means a lot more than just choosing one individual piece of that. You want to choose the partner that is going to work best, fit into your environment. That takes into account your existing tools that you're using. Can they integrate with them? As well as any future plans that you have. If you're looking to move to the cloud, but your vendor of choice is still on premises, then that's not going to work. So try to find partnerships and alliances that meet both your current needs and your future needs, and most importantly, that have partners building on top of them. So if you have a vendor that other vendors are building for, you know that's going to be a vibrant and viable ecosystem. Okay? And that's all from my area.
Oh, great, Alan. And this is very interesting given the fact that we're seeing the shifts and the changes in digital kind of take hold, and now people are actually trying to get some value. It's going to be interesting watching what you're doing on purposeful collaboration. But I think there's also another area that you're talking about that's going to be hot, which is personal analytics. Do you want to spend like 30 seconds talking about what that is?
Absolutely. Very simply put, there's a lot of talk about data and analytics these days. And most of the time, what we hear about is, how are the shopping figures on a big holiday, or what are the massive weather patterns that are happening? My area of interest is more specific to the individual. How can we take a look at things that are happening around the things we do at work? If you think about quantified self, or Ray mentioned earlier, the ability to monitor things like Fitbit, Nike Fuel Bands, they show us our exercise and they inspire us to do more, and they inspire us to compete against our friends. Now, if you could do that same thing at work, if you could get answers to some very simple questions like which of my blog posts had the most effect and the most reach, or which of the presentations I've shared actually led to closing the most sales deals, then that is what will be a powerful use of analytics inside the organization. I call it putting the me back in social media. Stop talking just about community, but allow me to focus on what I'm doing, what's been effective, and what hasn't been.
No, that's a great point. Guided by self-interest, it will actually improve adoption. All right. Hey, thanks a lot, Alan. We're going to get to Holger, who's going to talk a little bit about what's going on the future of work HCM side of the house in terms of trends. So, Holger, all yours.
Thank you, Ray. Great thoughts before, and we can go to the next slide and jump right into it. What is happening on the new business model side, right? We know digital disruption is changing fundamentally how businesses have to conduct business. But the key driver of doing that next to software, and we talk about that a lot, is still people. People are still the biggest expense in companies, and guess what? They're getting more expensive. Right? Ray talked about Rolls-Royce bringing production back. Cost arbitrage is no longer a big option. So now we see the second phase, or maybe the second renaissance of talent management starting on the recruiting side. So people are strategic. Companies have to live up to what they put in their public reports, that people are their most important assets. People talk about not being treated well and treated right, as we saw with Dr. Natalie before and with Alan before, and companies have to come to project-based business and organizing themselves more around contingent workforce and organizing their workers in a way that makes them more productive in getting to the goals where the digital transformation is taking them. It's not going to be solidified classic organization charts that will make them nimble and agile enough to get there. Next slide, please. And what's happening on the governance and culture side? On the governance side, as Ray said that, right? You pay more for taxes than for the rental car itself. The regulation tornado is only going to get stronger. Governments face the challenges of an aging population. They have to find ways to reform welfare. They have to find ways to redistribute. As I talk about that, they have to find ways to find different ways around healthcare. So the regulation is not going to get less; it's going to get more. At the same time, we have more proficient workforce. I'm not sure if we're getting to the baby typing on the laptop, but there's two perspectives on that. The millennials entering the workforce, making up to 50% in places like North America in 2020, and they will have different ways of working with software and dealing with people, process in the enterprise, and bring up a totally new challenge to the traditional older generation, Gen X, Gen Y, and even baby boomer managers. Next slide, please. On the technology side, and I'm taking 2 of the 10 trends here out of our HCM 2014 predictions, companies are really realizing that recruiting is the way to reinvent talent management, and bringing in the right talent for digital transformation is a key thing for their survival. And social is becoming the key leverage for that, right? We have an actual example of that today. Yesterday, when Workday, one of the HCM market leaders, announced they're acquiring an analytics company, helping them to source out of social networks in a better way. So very interesting that social is becoming relevant for HCM. Recruiting is the hot area, and it's kind of like intuitive that social networks, internal referrals, sourcing from these will be able to come to better talent, different talent. But it's also changing the business process, where a recruiter now doesn't have to wait to do a job post and wait for people to come, but can actively search social networks and find the right candidates and constantly look at, is my internal talent the right one? Is my external talent better? Do I have to improve my talent to become more competitive? On the technology side, people are realizing as they're getting more and more software as a service applications that all of a sudden it's no longer how do I introduce my software as a service product with my on-premise part, which both the vendors and companies and IT departments are well versed. All of a sudden you have these mushrooming software as a service applications. All of a sudden you need connections between these cloud applications. And companies are realizing that's getting harder. And the tie-in they all experience and that bad experience with from the on-premise world is coming to something which is maybe a nicer jail, but it's equally coming a lock-in on the cloud side. And this is why the relationships to the vendors and moving that to a productive relationship and not being tied in too much in that and keep an eye on that's going to be crucial. Next slide, please. Partnerships and alliances. For the HCM space specifically, I think we'll see less partnerships and alliances. If you spool back 2-3 years ago, everybody was partnering with a company called Thalia, which is now no longer here and part of Oracle, and people don't want to necessarily partner with them anymore. You see a key vendor, everybody is mostly partnering right now on the workforce management side with Kronos, which is the partner to go to, but Kronos, equally fresh coming from a round of refinancing, will chart their course and potentially become more of a competitor to the other vendors. So you'll see less partnership, which makes it even more important for you as a decision maker in the HCM space to make sure which vendor is going to be your vendor moving forward.
Well, wait, Holger, I think as you're talking about these shifts that are happening, not only in terms of the shifts that are going on in terms of the way people look at recruiting, are you seeing that people are recruiting more specialized people as opposed to what we're seeing in that shift in terms of we see automation and around job growth or robot taking over the world?
No, absolutely. On that? It's getting much more specialized, and as I said, in the trend to become a project. I want to hire a consultant for 2 months to help me figure out what the right customer experience is. It's not going to be a permanent job because I'm a smaller business. I want to have a specialist on social engagement, purposeful collaboration working for me for maybe 2 weeks a quarter, how I move the needle forward. So the needs get more specialized. You can look for them in much more specialist way, harvesting social networks, and then the engagement is going to be more project-based, more short-time based, which will change the whole way how we think about work in the future.
Great. Hey, thank you for that, Holger. I'm going to turn it over to Steve. Early morning out there in Sydney, talking about what's going on with identity, security, and privacy, as this ties back to areas around matrix commerce, as well as consumerization of technology. So, Steve, go ahead.
Thanks, Ray. And I think this is a fantastic way for me to start my day, to be honest. These issues occupy me pretty well 24/7. Ray's already touched on the information economy, but I think that term was obsolete. We're talking about so much more than information. We're talking about gigabits, terabits of information coursing through our day-to-day lives, our day-to-day interactions. And look how weird and wonderful things are. Google maps the world, driving up and down our streets, not only connecting geospatial information, but also, as it turns out, collecting our Wi-Fi data and perhaps over-collecting and getting a bit enthusiastic. We have a company called FaceDeals that is leveraging the facial biometric information in the Facebook mesh. It's not even clear if they're doing that with consent or transparency, but thanks to open APIs, innovative companies can access facial information and put it to new and frankly dubious uses. We have DNA hacking. We have Target, which of course has had a terrible recent misadventure with security. But before that, Target, of course, was subject to an interesting privacy scandal where their big data practitioners were determining if customers were pregnant based on buying history. And that's a privacy issue that's playing out. And we haven't seen anything yet, have we? We ain't seen nothing yet with Google Glass, augmented reality, augmented humanity just around the corner. Social media until now has been based, next slide, Ray, has been based on a bargain for private information for personal information. It's a little bit like those early settlers in New York. They bought Manhattan for what, $25 worth of trinkets, and there is this one-sided bargain at the core of online business today, where without knowing it, we are trading personal information in return for fabulous services and so on and so forth. But the bargain is opaque. The bargain is largely one-sided. And we at Constellation think that there is a new compact emerging between digital businesses and customers. Look at data analytics, look at big data. It's not for nothing that we call this stuff data mining, is it? Or data refining. The raw data that's coursing through cyberspace is really the new black gold, and companies are out there mining, prospecting without a license, and they don't know what they're going to find. Now, this is not doom and gloom. The bargain for benefit in big data can be a win-win, as long as we understand that privacy is not about secrecy. Privacy is not even about banning anything. Privacy is about transparency and restraint. And those commitments that businesses make to their users and their customers apply just as much to big data as it does to the information that we actually gather directly from people. So if digital businesses can explain what information they're collecting, why they're collecting and generating it from data mining, how do they do it, and to whom do they disclose the spoils of big data, then that's privacy. And we can actually have that bargain for personal information and services. We can have that bargain and retain privacy. It's a paradox that we're spending a lot of time researching at Constellation. On security, folks, we're at a terrible tipping point. Everybody's talking about security, but we don't think anybody's really doing much about it. The security philosophy until now has been all about policies and procedures and audit. The security methods that we use today really have their roots in ISO 9001, 25 years ago, and that was a problematic system. We've seen the problems of audit ever since. We've seen the Enron, Arthur Andersen's collapse. And we think that we're sleepwalking into the same sorts of disasters now. We have an audit, paper-pushing, checkbox approach to security, and look where it's got us. Businesses are leaking like sieves. We have built a security system or a computer system that is so fragile, it's almost like a game of Jenga, right? You move one little piece and the whole thing collapses. Literally, you may know of the failure in a really important piece of code in the Apple operating system just last week. And anybody on the call that has not patched their iPhone or their iPad device most recently, this is really pressing. There's a one-line bug in iOS 7 that neutralizes website security and leaving people to the mercy of counterfeit websites and organized crime. That was a single line of code in 100 million lines of code, and the error in a single line of code has brought it all down. We are at the leading edge of this business. We think that a new approach to security is necessary. We think that we actually need to take the suits out of the data center and replace it with real ability, real talent, get some real rigor back in the way that software is written. And we have a Constellation Research panel in security, and we would love to reach out to interested parties and collaborate and try and unpack a paradigm shift in security. Yeah, security is still too visible. It's in your face. The responsibility that we each feel to patch our operating systems and to hire security people, and it's like the really early days of automobile working, right? So I ask you, do you, when you buy a car, do you actually go out there? Next slide, thanks, Ray. Does anybody go out there and buy a carburetor as part of their car? Do you even know if you've got a carburetor? I mean, I don't. The modern engine is beyond comprehension, right? But the engine metaphor is important because it's all about pushing complexity underneath the hood. And we've yet to do this in security. The mobile platform, we're looking there at the new Samsung 5S, just announced last week. In fact, this week, just announced 2 days ago, with a biometric security feature that allows you to go straight through to PayPal and to literally pay with a swipe of a finger from your Samsung phone. That sort of embedding of sophisticated security They're using what's called the FIDO Alliance protocols for exchanging personal information between the phone and the server and PayPal, keeping your personal details private. It's clearly the way of the future, and we are getting embedded convenience at the same time as privacy and security for the very first time. The challenge, we think, is that the internet was based on PCs and internet protocol 25 years ago that were not fit for purpose. These were built for home hobbyists and for scientists. And we think that with the mobile platform, we have a really unique opportunity now to do security different, to do security smart, and to embed these things into the platform. And finally, and on that point about supply chains and partnerships and alliances, the supply chain for security is in great upheaval at the moment, and we think that a supply chain is going to emerge in the next 5 years. What do I mean by that? I mean the carburetor analogy. If you buy a car, you don't think about all the bits and pieces that go into it, and yet behind the scenes, under the covers, we know that there's an incredible supply chain of sophisticated vendors and manufacturers and buyers and integrators. Security is now heading the same way. Major M&A activity. Intel bought the McAfee company a year ago and is now rebranding, security inside. IBM just before Christmas bought the FiberLink company, one of the leading mobile device management companies. VMware just 2 weeks ago, in the biggest acquisition in this space so far, $1 billion acquisition of AirWatch, another mobile device management and security company. And finally, we've got the Salesforce ForgeRock. I'm not implying here that there's an acquisition, but Salesforce is aligned with ForgeRock. Who's heard of ForgeRock, right? But they are one of the most important identity technology companies. Salesforce have brought that technology in under the covers. They've leveraged their customer relationship mesh, and they're now pushing out an amazing disruptive identity product, showing the room for innovation in privacy and security, and really showing what this supply chain may look like going forward. Thanks, Ray.
No, this is great, Stephen. And with RSA going on and ending today, we've heard a lot of these issues kind of pick up, and it's impacting just commerce. It's impacting what people are doing with customer experience. It's impacting digital marketing. This is going to be a hot area to watch in terms of some of the stuff that you are doing. And this leads to the point, right? Digital disruption. This is much more than technology shifts. We are seeing new business models emerge as a result. And I think this is the important thing to understand is it's not the technologies that are going to change. It's these other factors around PESTEL that are creating opportunities to create new business models. And this is going back to why we exist, is really to help people figure out where these disruptions are going. And we're actually looking at these across, as we kind of hinted, the future of work, what's happening in terms of the workplace, what's happening in terms of how people are interacting, engaging, looking at customer experience, what's happening on the customer front in terms of how we can create those kind of engaged experiences and mass personalization at scale. We're seeing it around matrix commerce as people change the way they buy. This is anything from the digital wallets that are going on to the fact that commerce is coming to around the buyer as opposed to the other way around. We're seeing digital marketing transformation. We'll have some announcements about that as we talk forward, but really about the shift from programmatic to real-time to demand-side platforms. From data to decisions, this is some of the analytics that are driving a lot of this, making augmented humanity possible, making big data business models work. We're also looking at technology optimization innovation, really figuring out where in the world can we pay for all this and drive down the cost structure. And of course, what's happening in the new C-suite and consumerization of technology. These are our business themes, and these themes are pulling from the PESTEL framework as we think about big ideas that are ahead and really what's impacting models going forward. So what's happening? Well, we really want you to think about how to prepare to dominate for digital business disruption. These are things you should be thinking about in your next planning cycle. If you're building your strategic plan in 2014, 2015, going to fiscal year 2016, figure out what this futurist framework is. How does it apply to you, right? Engage the different parts of our organization to help you figure that out. Figure out where business models are actually happening with these new technologies. It's, like I said earlier, if you could take a technology like 3D printing, which is helping you deliver mass personalization at scale, it's partly the fact that it sits within standalone, but how can you apply it in different ways to transform, for example, how food is delivered, or to transfer how specific spare parts are made, or to transfer I mean, all these things are what you're trying to think about. Inside your organization, you're going to want to think about how you light up things like purposeful collaboration to build a culture of innovation and disruption. What are you going to do to invest in talented and creative people that you have to bring on board? And then, of course, thinking internally. What is your mythology? What is your brand? What is that experience? How do you create a level of authenticity to be successful? So with that, I think the last thing is you've all seen the deeper framework we've used before, really about tech adoption. It's important to think about each one of these areas, how you actually build the right level of support, how you figure out what's hype versus reality, getting the metrics that matter so you can tie these back into business models, and then making sure you choose the right platforms and technologies or building the right level of governance and collaboration so that you can actually come back and build this into the budget, scale this across the organization from a small pilot project to something that works in a department, to a division, to company-wide, to even at your customers, partners, and employees. And then, of course, how do we keep up with this? And how do you keep up with these innovations? But use the deeper framework, apply that so you'll be successful, and then go from there. So let's go to questions and answers. We actually have some time to do that. We've got a great question from a longtime friend and customer and client. His question is, gotta believe that the wearables era ushers in unrecognized privacy security issues. Any thoughts? I'm going to start with Steve here. Steve, what do you think about that in answer to Carl here?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a subtle answer. We have become hypnotized, almost sort of fatalistic about this idea that we're going to give up privacy in return for fabulous services. And here's the subtlety. Privacy is not the personal information. Privacy is the control and the restraint that we have about the personal information. It's entirely possible and reasonable that we should trade personal information for services. I don't mind giving up stuff like my shopping history and as part of a loyalty program in order to get back some sort of frequent flyer benefits. Okay, a real crude example. I don't mind that. I'm not losing privacy if the people that are accepting my personal information are restrained in what they do, they're respectful, and they're transparent. If there's a bargain between services and personal information, then that bargain needs to be transparent, and people need to be restrained. I do not want Qantas selling my frequent flyer history onto other retailers or transport groups, right? But I don't mind them keeping that information private. So go forward to the Internet of Things and augmented reality, the same principles apply. If I'm wearing Google Glass and my whereabouts and who I'm talking to and what I'm drinking and where I'm going and the movies I'm watching, all of that information goes to Google, and if they leverage that information for services back to me, then believe it or not, folks, that is still privacy. Privacy is about restraint, transparency. So we can move information, we can trade in personal information, but privacy is all about restraint and self-control, self-determination, and that goes to this new compact, a new compact between digital businesses and customers that we're trying to unpack at Constellation.
Hey, this is wonderful, Steve. Hey, we actually got another question here. This is directed to Alan. Alan, the question was, why is this thing about 5 generations of digital workers have nothing to do with millennials? Can you talk a little bit about that? Because a lot of efforts are focused on millennials and millennial marketing today and catering to them.
Sure thing. Let me give a quick example. I know we don't have a lot of time. We try to base our decisions on people when we do it on age by saying things like, this person knows how to use this technology, or this person knows how to use that. You know, somebody likes working off their mobile phone versus someone likes working on their the web. These are mass generalizations that don't apply across the board to people. You can't say that a 20-year-old is going to be more inclined to use one technology than another. Instead, digital proficiency says, look, this person, based on their education, their surroundings, their environment, their upbringing, their peer group, their circle, all of these things have implied or led to the use of somebody around their technology. There's lots of 60-year-olds that are better on Facebook than their 20-year-olds. All of us that are out there tweeting right now are in our 30s, 40s, and 50s, not, you know, teenagers. So to look at these things solely based on someone's age doesn't give you an accurate representation. So what we do at Constellation is we have this survey ranging anywhere from 20 to 50 questions that walk through all different aspects of your life that we bucket into 3 categories: how you interact with content, how you interact with people, And then the daily actions you take, things ranging from how do you wake up to how you pay your bills. So anytime you see someone in their 30s and 40s hailing a cab via Uber cab, should we say, hey, wait, you're not a millennial? So again, I think digital proficiency takes age out of the equation and helps people figure out, based on their skill and their comfort level with technology, how you should be segmenting them. Very
No,
quick answer to a long issue. I hope that helped.
no, that's great information there, and some good insights. Holger, quickly for you on your end, as you're seeing, some of these shifts in terms of what's happening on not only just HCM but also on the cloud. What's cloud doing to changing the way people access services or access innovation?
Well, cloud is a fundamental enabler to speeding up processes and innovation in general, right? Right now, I mean, 10 years ago, when you want to build some good software, you needed lots of CapEx, lots of salespeople, lots of engineering, and would take you a year. And today, with the same code, in a month, you can run on your own credit card, you go viral, use the social networks, and that changes the whole way how innovation is happening to the enterprise automation space and how innovation is brought to users. And it makes all the innovation cycles much, much faster, much more challenging for vendors, but equally on the user and buyer side, because you have to watch this market much, much faster. You have to try to avoid lock-in so you can move to the next innovation that your competitor doesn't outpace you. And it's proven to be much, much more dynamic at a much, much lower cost, which is all
Great point.
good for innovation.
Great point. Quick programming note. Courtney's mentioning that we are now launching Constellation Research office hours. March 25th is the first one, 9 a.m. Pacific. You can ask any question. You can kind of talk to the analysts. You can engage with us live. It's a monthly program that's kicking off there. We got a couple more questions to answer. I know some folks have to jump off. Feel free to jump off. I know, Alan, you've got to go, and I know some other folks will have to jump off. But here's a quick question. Someone is asking, Aesop's grasshopper is trouncing the ant. What tipping point observations should we be looking for to determine if political leadership is truly comprehending the situation? So, Natalie, Holger, Alan, anybody want to answer that, or I will jump in?
Well, I think leadership in politics, they don't get it. If they did get it, they'd be making much different decisions. I kind of call it the hair on fire syndrome, where they're so busy doing whatever it is that they're doing that they're not slowing down enough to really create a strategy. And I think part of that is the technology we use has speeded everything up. But technology without a good strategy just means that you're going to do the wrong things faster. And if we keep doing this, we're going to head into some brick walls and into some alleys that we're going to be sorry and wish that we could back up from. And sometimes, if you keep going in a direction without really picking up your head to see where you're headed, you may end up in a completely different place. And so I just like to really communicate to senior leadership, please slow down, please take time to do strategy, and please don't delegate your digital and social strategies to someone younger in your organization just because you think they know how to use Facebook because they communicate with their friends. The
That's the same
ability,
point.
if
That's actually
right, the ability to create a corporate strategy that reaches business goals like reducing costs and increasing revenue has nothing to do with whether you know how to post to your friends on Facebook.
That's a great point, and as this question is actually tied back to political leadership in terms of the political class, same thing that's happening with staffers on the Hill, same thing happening in the EU as people are actually looking to figure out who should actually be determining these policies. And back to the question as well is, a tipping point would be when you actually see an example like H-1B visas not be tied back to illegal immigration. Right? These are things that people do artificially to actually create issues that prevent digital disruption, as one example. We get another question here. We'll take one last question here. What is your take on the fact that companies are actually competing on digital experiences and product quality versus similar products in the same industry? So, anybody want to go after that? I will jump in then real quickly. The take here really is the fact that we are no longer selling products or services. We are selling a brand promise. And if you understand that point, these digital experiences have to be authentic. These digital experiences have to be trusted. These digital experiences are going to be co-created and co-innovated on. And I know it's a quick answer to a very complicated question, but each one of those points have sub-points that will help you understand where these digital experiences are much more than just making a product. It's the entire life cycle of that ownership experience from both the customer, the partner, the supplier, and the and the employee's perspective. And you've got to take a holistic view for that in order to be successful. Oh, one last question here. Very good question. Where can we get this presentation and download this? I believe that the paper is up on the website under research. If you click on the research tab, you can actually purchase the paper if you need to. If you are looking for a download of this presentation, I think you can, I believe we had that earlier in the chat. I believe you can actually download all this. Yes, you can actually download the Outlook under Constellation Research, and you can be able to pick it up from there at constellationr.com/research. So, hey, great thank you to everyone else that has attended. Thank you to Alan, Holger, Natalie, as well as Steve. Welcome, and welcome to the Digital Outlook for 2014. I'm signing off.